Okay, so this is the video on Chapter 5, the Internet and its uses for 0478 and 0984. Now, Chapter 5, compared to the rest of the chapters, is very heavily based on memorization. And I'm going to follow through this PowerPoint here, which is made according to the specification. So in terms of basic definitions, you just need to know that the Internet itself, a very simplified version of this, is the Internet is the infrastructure. And by infrastructure, what we mean is the cables, the towers, servers, nodes / devices. So this would be like a user's computer, and etc. Okay, that's a very simplified definition of what the internet would be. The World Wide Web, on the other hand, is all the software and data that runs on top of the internet. So this includes things like protocols, so HTTPS is an example of a protocol. HTML is part of, a coding language that works for websites. So anything software is going to be part of the World Wide Web, whereas anything physically, hardware-wise, is going to be infrastructure under the internet. Okay. So a key thing that you need to know is the type of, you need to know like the features of the web browser, right? So this comes up pretty often, and it can come up either as a standard question where they just ask you the features, or it can be a question based around a specific feature. In terms of the specific features, the most common one that they like to talk about is cookies, right? They want you to know the difference between temporary cookies and persistent cookies, which we'll explain in the next slide. They also like to ask you about bookmarks here. So a common example is that you actually can't say any of these names in an exam. You're not allowed to say specific package names. You just have to say web browser. When you're talking about a web browser, you just have to say web browser. And over here, you have outlined some of the main features of web browser. Now, you don't necessarily need to memorize this. From the way I see it, the best way of doing it is simply think of an open Chrome tab, right? Everyone has an open Chrome tab. You have your X, your close, minimize everything over here. You have an address bar, right? And then you have your bookmarks over here. You have extensions over here, right, with the jigsaw icon. Okay, you have settings, right? So think of it like that, right? And for example, let's say this is Google, right? This and this are both your address bars. Okay, this is where you type in the address, right? And as you can see, okay, and these are your other features, right? You have bookmarks. You have the ability to add extensions, right? Extensions might not be on the mark scheme, but they're still good to know for visualization of this, right? Everything you see on this homepage of web browser, you can talk about as a feature, right? You have these things on the side that let you skip back and forth between pages, right? Skip back and forth, right? You have the settings, your user preferences. Those settings count as user preferences, right? And then whenever you log onto a website, you get a pop-up that asks for cookies, right? Cookies are also stored in the web browser. So all these things, it's an easy way of memorizing what is effectively just a large section of bullet points, because that's a common theme within this chapter, because it's mostly memorizing. Now, the Uniform Resource Locator is often confused with the address bar. Why is that, Bill? Because when you have a web browser, right, and this is your search box, the box itself is called the address bar, right? But once you type in a URL, for example, youtube.com, and you hit enter, the Uniform Resource Locator is actually a piece of software, right, that allows you to enter in this text, and then it communicates with the DNS server, which is on the next slide, and that DNS server then gives you the website itself, right? So the URL Uniform Resource Locator is not the address bar, but it's very close to it, right? And usually they'll ask you specifically about the URL. They don't often ask about the address bar specifically. And here's the breakdown of it. It's pretty simple. If you think about, HTTPS youtube.com/w6zy6, something like this, right? We can compare it directly here. HTTPS, this is our protocol. The first part of your address is the protocol. How are we communicating? Is it secure? Is it not secure, right? And that's what the S stands for. Okay? S stands for secure. HTTP is unsecure. Secure just means it's encrypted and the connection is secure. You can't read the data directly. Okay, then you have domain host, which usually is www, and you might not see it often in addresses because it gets hidden, but it is always there. And then you have the website name. In our case, it's YouTube. Over here, it's Hotter Education, right? You have the domain type, which basically dictates whether or not what kind of entity runs this website, right? So, you might, .com is the most common one because it can be owned privately, publicly, it doesn't matter. .org, .net, these are also common, but .org and .gov are usually used by government websites or for organizations. So this might be like a charity or a collective, right? So these might be more private websites that are not meant to be met for the common person, right? So that's the Uniform Resource Locator. Now the difference between HTTP and HTTPS, in terms of the specification itself, what you need to know is that HTTP is not secure, right? There is no lock icon, right? No lock on the web browser, and data is not encrypted. That's basically all you need to know, right? In terms of what actually is HTTP, it's, as it says here, a set of rules and guidelines that dictate the exchange of information across the internet, right? It's a way for you to view web pages that have been uploaded. Now, HTTPS is the new version of HTTP, and the main difference is it adds a layer of security, right, with specifically SSL and TSL. So, transport layer security, and server socket security. Secure socket layer. Secure socket layer. Now, you don't need to know these in depth, but in essence, what these do are, when communicating with a server, so if I wipe everything here, and let's say this is our server, right? Let's just say it's youtube.com, right? And this is our client, so your laptop or your iPad, whatever it might be, client. Before transmission begins, right, the client will send a request to the server. The client will try to access the server, right? The server will send the client its certificate, right? Its authentication certificate. Okay, this basically means I'm a legitimate website. This is not fake, and it's secure. All your data is correctly encrypted. The client will go to a CA/a certification authority, right? This is going to be usually another server that's well known, and it will then confirm whether or not this is legit. Okay, is it legitimate? If it is legitimate, right, if it passes the legitimacy test from the certification authority, then these two will begin transmitting data between each other, knowing that all the data here is encrypted, which I'm going to represent using this lock because that's how the exam board likes to represent it. And that's all SSL is.